What if the first person you rescue becomes the one person you can never walk away from? The high desert wind blew hard across the New Mexico territory that late October morning, carrying dust, burnt powder, and the heavy scent of danger. Daniel Reed rode slowly through the rocky land on his buckskin horse, Sully. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was only checking his trap lines, but trouble often found him long before he found it. The land around him was empty and harsh, a place where a man could disappear without a trace. The wind stung his face, and the sun sat low over the distant mountains. As he turned into a shallow gully, he stopped cold. There, lying crooked in the sand, was a missionary wagon, or what was left of it. One wheel was shattered. The canvas cover was torn and burnt. 2 mules lay dead in their traces, their throats cut. 2 men, dressed in black frock coats, were sprawled beside the wagon, their pale faces frozen in shock. Daniel's jaw tightened. Bandits, he thought. Apache warriors would have taken the animals. This was something uglier. He slid off Sully, rifle ready, and moved slow around the wreck. The raid was long over, but he had learned never to trust a quiet battlefield. His boots scraped over splattered flour and beans. Food sacks were ripped open, whiskey taken, ammunition gone. The preacher he recognized from Santa Fe lay with his eyes wide, staring at the sky. Then he heard it. A soft, thin sound, like metal dragging over stone. Daniel turned quickly, lifting his rifle. Behind the wagon, chained to the rear axle, was a girl. She was young, maybe 18, maybe 19. Apache. Her long black hair was tangled and stiff with dirt and blood. The calico dress she wore was torn, and the iron cuff around her ankle had rubbed her skin raw. She flinched when his shadow fell over her, pulling away like a terrified animal. The chain yanked her short and bit into her ankle, making her cry out in pain. Daniel froze. He lowered the rifle, seeing now what the preacher had done. The bruises on her arms, the cuts on her skin, the broken look in her eyes. He didn't know her, but he knew suffering when he saw it. "Easy," he said. His voice was low and careful. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't understand the words, or maybe she didn't trust them. She stared at him with wide, dark eyes full of fear. Daniel slowly went to his saddlebag and took out a canteen. He drank first, showing her it was safe, then set it on the ground near her reach. She hesitated, then grabbed it with trembling hands. Water spilled down her chin as she drank too fast, desperate and starved. He knelt by the chain and examined the iron. It was thick and cruel. He pulled out his file. "This is gonna be loud," he muttered, mostly to himself. The girl tensed at every scrape of metal. He filed until his hands burned, sweat dripping from his brow. Finally, after 20 long minutes, the chain snapped. The girl stared down at the broken link, her fingers brushing it, as if she didn't understand freedom. Daniel stood and offered his hand. "Can you walk?" She didn't answer. She didn't try. He sighed and backed away to give her space. He laid a blanket and a strip of jerky on the ground, then sat on a nearby rock, 20 feet away, waiting. The wind whistled across the plain. Minutes passed. At last, she ate, slowly, carefully. Then she stood. Barefoot, trembling, but standing. Daniel mounted Sully and looked down at her. "You come with me," he said. "You stay here, you'll die tonight." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She walked toward him. Her steps were slow and painful but steady. When she reached him, she stopped. She didn't take his hand. She just waited. Daniel leaned down, lifted her gently, and settled her in front of him on the saddle. She stiffened at his touch, pressing herself against the horn of the saddle, as if she wished she could disappear. He wrapped the old blanket around her trembling shoulders. "You're safe now," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if that was true. "Not out here, not anywhere." The long ride back to his isolated homestead was silent. Her back was rigid against his chest the whole way. He felt every tremble of her body through his own coat. When they reached his small log cabin tucked between the aspens and pines, he slid off the horse and lifted her down carefully. She didn't fight him. She didn't help him either. She simply endured. Inside, the cabin was one room, rough, plain, and lonely. He set her in the only chair and lit a fire to chase away the cold creeping into her bones. She watched everything he did, her eyes sharp with fear. "My name is Daniel," he said softly as the warm light filled the room. "Daniel Reed." She didn't reply. She only watched him like a cornered animal, waiting to see if the stranger was predator or shelter. When he approached with warm water to clean the blood from her forehead, she flinched hard, raising her hands to guard herself. Daniel froze, then slowly lowered the cloth. "Easy," he murmured. "I'm not them." Her breath shuddered, and after a long moment she let him touch her, just barely. He cleaned her cut, fed her a warm bowl of cornmeal, gave her the cot while he took the floor. But she didn't trust the four walls. She slipped outside in the night and slept, curled against the cabin wall on the porch, terrified of being trapped in a room with a man again. Daniel didn't sleep. He sat by the fire all night, staring at the door, afraid she'd freeze, afraid she'd run, afraid he'd fail her somehow. By dawn, her skin was cold as ice, her breathing shallow. He carried her inside despite her weak protests, wrapped her in blankets, and stayed by her side through the fever that took hold. For 4 days she fought sickness and nightmares. For 4 days he fed her broth, washed her face, and spoke to her in a gentle voice he didn't know he still had. On the 5th morning, her eyes opened, clear, alive. Watching him with something new, caution, yes, but also something softer, something that was no longer fear. He didn't know it yet, but nothing in his life would ever be the same again. What if the moment you try to protect someone becomes the moment the whole world turns against you? The days after her fever broke felt different. The girl who had once sat trembling in corners now watched Daniel with quiet focus. She moved slower, but she was steady. She ate the food he left for her. She used the comb he'd placed by the woodpile. She stayed close to the cabin but never went far from the door, always choosing a space where she could escape if needed. Daniel built her a small room on the back porch, a place with its own door, and a latch she could lock from the inside. When he finished and showed it to her, she touched the latch gently, as if testing the idea of safety she controlled. That night, he heard the wooden latch slide shut. She was protected, but on her own terms. Winter closed in around them, snow dusted the pines, and the wind howled through the valley like a lonely creature. Daniel worked from dawn until dusk, chopping wood, hauling water, and fixing the roof. One morning, while he swung his axe, he felt eyes on him. He turned. She stood 20 feet away, silent, watching. She pointed at the axe. He blinked. "You want to help?" She nodded once. A small, determined nod. He hesitated. She was thin and weak still, but her stare didn't waver. So he taught her, slowly, carefully. He showed her how to brace the wood, how to let the axe fall with its own weight. She tried, failed, tried again, then again. Her palms blistered, her arms trembled. But she didn't stop. The next morning, she was back at the woodpile before he was. Soon, she was helping with everything. Mending fences, grinding corn, carrying firewood, sorting beans. She watched him closely, studying how he tied knots, how he cleaned his rifle, how he checked the sky for storms. She learned without asking. She copied his motions until she could do them herself. The silent air between them slowly shifted into a quiet partnership. Then, one night, everything changed. A wicked wind tore across the mountains. Snow fell in thick sheets, and the cabin shook under the storm's weight. Their small room for her was too cold, so Daniel brought her inside. She sat on the rug near the fire while he worked on repairing a bridle. A sudden crack of thunder made her flinch and stare at him. She crawled closer. He tensed, unsure. But she only reached out slowly and touched the scar on the back of his hand, white and ridged from an old war wound. Her expression was simple, curious, almost innocent. "Why?" she whispered. "Does your heart sleep alone?" Daniel froze. Her question cut through him like a blade. He pulled his hand back and stood up, suddenly needing distance, suddenly unable to breathe. "It's late," he said. "You should sleep." She turned and slipped into her little room. The latch clicked softly behind her. He stayed awake all night, unable to escape the truth she had seen in him. But winter eventually gave way. Snow melted. The cabin breathed again. Daniel worked on repairing a cracked roof beam one warm afternoon, sweat soaking through his flannel shirt. When the heat grew too heavy, he pulled the shirt off. His back and chest were scarred from years of battles, storms, and work. He didn't hear her approach. "Your skin?" she said behind him, making him jolt. "It is not like mine." She wasn't looking at his face. She was studying his chest, tracing his muscles with her eyes. "It is strong," she observed. "This is why white women want babies from men like you?" He almost dropped his tools. "What? No, that's not. People don't. That's not why." She kept studying him with quiet, deep curiosity, curiosity that made him feel exposed in a way he wasn't prepared for. From that day on, her questions changed. "Why are your hands rough? Why do you not sing? Why do you carry sadness in your eyes? Why do you wake when the wind is loud?" He didn't have answers, and he didn't expect what happened next. One afternoon, needing a break from the tension between them, he went down to the creek to wash. The water was icy. He stripped and waded in, scrubbing quickly with harsh soap. When he surfaced, gasping from the cold, she was there, on the bank, holding his towel. "Ty, turn around! Go back!" he yelled, sinking into the water. She blinked calmly. "You were dirty. Now you are clean." "That's not the point!" He stayed in the freezing water until he couldn't breathe. When he finally climbed out, shivering, she stepped forward and touched an old scar on his thigh, her fingers soft and curious. "This one was bad," she whispered. Before he could stop her, she leaned down and pressed her lips gently to the scar. A soft, reverent touch. Not passion, not seduction, something else. Something he didn't know how to name. He jerked back, heart pounding. "No, don't ever do that," he said, shaken. That night, everything shattered. She sat in her small room, staring at the firelight. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "The men before, they hurt me. They were cold, like stone." He froze. She swallowed hard, tears gathering. "But not you. You are warm." Her voice grew smaller. "I am safe, but I am not warm." She turned her face away, as if she had said something shameful. Then she closed her door. No latch slid into place. For the first time, a week later, a storm rolled in. A violent, furious storm. Lightning cracked. Thunder shook the cabin. She screamed and ran to him, crawling onto his cot, burying herself in his blankets. "Hold me," she cried. He held her, not like a husband, not like a lover, like someone trying to pull her back from darkness. She calmed. The storm eased, but when she lifted her face toward his, her voice was soft. "I want to feel what women feel," she whispered. "I want to know." His heart stopped. "Tyenne, no. This is not just heat. It has to be a choice, not fear. Not because you're cold." She searched his eyes, confused. But he stayed firm. And she walked away again, silent and hurting. He thought that was the end of it. He was wrong. A few days later, he returned from the corral and froze in the doorway. She was barefoot, wearing one of his old flannel shirts, humming softly as she ground corn. She looked peaceful. She looked like she belonged in his home and his life. Then she turned her head slightly, revealing her hair, braided up, styled like a married Apache woman. He stopped breathing. She didn't explain it. She didn't have to. Everything had changed. And the world outside their cabin was about to find out. What if the moment you try to build a quiet life becomes the moment danger finally finds you? The world outside their hidden valley did not forget Daniel Reed. Rumors traveled faster than horses. Some men said he lived with an Apache woman. Others said he stole her. Others whispered that he killed for her. Every version traveled, twisted, and tangled until trouble was no longer a question of if, but when. Daniel felt it coming. He felt it every time he went into town for supplies and saw men watching him with dark eyes. He felt it when storekeepers grew silent as he walked by. He felt it when he heard the word Apache spoken like a curse. But he hid the worry from Tyenne. He focused on work, on the cabin, on her growing belly, on the cradle he carved at night, on the way her face lit up whenever she felt their child move. For a little while, the valley felt peaceful. But peace never lasted. One hot morning, Daniel rode into Santa Fe for seed, coffee, and cloth for the baby. He wanted to hurry. He wanted to get back home. But as soon as he pushed through the general store door, he felt the eyes on him. 3 ranch hands by the stove and 1 drifter he recognized. They were waiting. Silence filled the room. Then Clay Hackett smirked from the far wall. "Heard you got company up on that ridge, Reed," he drawled. Daniel kept his back straight. "My business is my own." "Not when your company is a stolen Apache girl," Jeb Smith added. "Reverend Pike's been talking." The words hit like a blow. Daniel turned slowly. "Pike?" "Yep," Clay sneered. "Says she belongs to him. Says you've got her tucked away like some prize." Daniel's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "She was chained to his wagon, half dead. That's the truth." "That's not what we heard." That was when Clay made the mistake. He said her name. He said it like a slur. Then he laughed about Daniel's dead wife. Said Daniel couldn't get over a half-breed, so he took another. Daniel didn't remember moving. His fist connected with Clay's jaw so hard, the man flew backwards into a barrel. Jeb lunged. Daniel struck him too. The drifter swung, but Daniel ducked and slammed him into the wall. When the fight was over, 3 men lay groaning on the floor. Daniel tossed money on the counter for the damage. He mounted Sully and rode home as fast as he could, heart pounding. He knew what he had done. He had opened a door. He had made enemies, bad ones. He reached the cabin by sunset. Tyenne was standing on the porch. When she saw the bruises and dried blood on his knuckles, she didn't ask questions. She only took his hand, pulled him inside, and cleaned his wounds with a steady touch. "No one," she whispered quietly as she worked, "ever bled for me." Daniel swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say, so he just held her hand. The trouble arrived 2 days later. Tyenne stood on the porch, scanning the ridge with Daniel's field glass while he went for water. Her breath caught when she saw 4 riders coming down the northern slope, a hard trail, an unexpected approach. Reverend Pike rode in front. Clay Hackett rode beside him, his face still marked from the knife she used to defend herself. They were coming for her. Tyenne raised Daniel's rifle, fired 1 warning shot into the sky, then ran for the trees just as he'd taught her. But the men spurred their horses. "There she is!" Hackett roared. "Grab her!" The drifter cut her off. Hackett leapt from his horse and tackled her. She fought wildly, her hands clawing for freedom. Her fingers brushed the small kitchen knife tucked in her skirt. She drew it and slashed up across Hackett's face. He screamed. Blood poured. She broke free and ran, but she was cornered on a ledge above a steep drop when Jeb and the drifter closed in. "Come down, girl," Jeb coaxed. "We ain't gonna hurt you." She tightened her grip on the knife, her back inches from the cliff edge. Then a rifle shot cracked through the air. The drifter fell first. Jeb turned, shocked, reaching for his gun. A second shot dropped him. They were dead before they hit the ground. Daniel stepped from the shadows above them, rifle still raised. His face was calm, too calm. Pike saw him and screamed, "Murderer! God will punish you!" Quote. Daniel walked toward him, slow and steady, rifle aimed. "You try to take her again?" he said coldly, "and I'll bury you myself." Hoofbeats thundered. Sheriff Brody and 2 deputies appeared. The sheriff looked at the bodies, then at Daniel, then at Pike. "What happened here?" Brody demanded. Pike pointed at Daniel. "He killed my men. He stole my ward. Arrest him!" Tyenne stepped forward. Her voice was steady. Her English was clear. "He bought me," she said. "He chained me. He beat me. He kept me like an animal. These men came to steal me. Daniel saved me." Silence fell like a stone. Brody's eyes hardened. "Reverend Pike, you're under arrest for kidnapping and illegal trading." Pike screamed as the deputies dragged him away. Daniel finally lowered his rifle. Tyenne's legs buckled, the terror she'd held back shaking through her now that danger had passed. Daniel caught her, lifted her in his arms, and carried her home. He held her for a long time. She cried quietly into his shirt, her tears warm against his skin. "It's over," he whispered. "You're safe now. No one will ever take you again." Weeks passed. The world finally left them alone. Brody never returned. Rumors died. The valley grew peaceful again. Spring came. Tyenne's belly began to swell. One night she woke Daniel with trembling hands. "The deer," she whispered, "it did not run in my dream." Daniel's heart pounded. "Your monthly time. How long since?" Quote. Her eyes widened. "A baby," she breathed. He placed his hand gently on her stomach, and she covered his hand with hers. "Our baby," she whispered. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something warm bloom inside him. Hope. He worked harder than ever, building a new room with his own hands, carving a cradle, making toys, and singing the soft lullabies she taught him. She learned to read. He learned her songs. Their lives blended like colors in the dawn. When she went into labor months later, he feared losing her like he'd lost his wife. But she gripped his hand through the pain. "Do not fear," she gasped. "We are storms. We survive." At dawn, with thunder rolling softly in the distance, their daughter was born, a perfect, tiny girl with a strong cry and dark hair. Tyenne whispered her name. "Nantani, she brings light." Daniel held his daughter, his eyes burning with tears he hadn't shed in years. He kissed Tyenne's forehead. "You brought her into this world," he whispered. "You saved us both." Seasons passed. Their valley healed. The danger faded. The baby grew strong. One peaceful afternoon by the creek, Tyenne rested against Daniel's chest, Nantani, asleep in her arms. She looked at the child for a long moment, then lifted her eyes to Daniel with a soft, curious smile. The same curious smile she once had when she asked her first innocent question. "So," she whispered, touching her baby's tiny hand, "this is how white people make children." Daniel laughed quietly, kissing her hair. "No," he murmured. "This is how we made a child, together." Their hands rested over their daughter, their family, their new beginning.